Hello, you are listening to Talking Utter Slot, the slot car podcast. Be it Skeletric or Carrera, Slot It or SCX, we love buying, racing and most of all, talking about slot cars. My name is Scott Brownlee and I'm joined as usual by my fellow slot addict and car racer,
Pedro. Oh, you do? You want me to say more? We had this the last time as well. Should we do it a third time? Because I've just talked over you.
Okay. Right, do you want me to write something for you to say?
Which is my name, will be fine. I can remember that much.
Not always.
Outrageous.
Hello, you're listening to Talking Utter Slot, the slot car podcast. Be it Skeletric or Carrera, Slot It or SCX, we love buying, racing and most of all, talking about slot cars. My name is Scott Brownlee and I'm joined as usual by
Pedro.
In this episode, we'll be hearing about what Pedro has been watching on TV and YouTube. Don't worry, it's not X-rated. Wondering how many organs we'd need to sell in order to buy the upcoming Avant Slot Mercedes race transporter and Grand Prix car, and speculating what, if anything, we'd make if we had a 3D printer. We start with a correction, an admission. We got our pony cars mixed up. Over to Pedro for the details.
I was going to say, when you say we, what you mean is Pedro. Pedro got it all. There's a phrase for that, but I'm not sure. Are we a family-friendly podcast? I think we are, so I won't say arse about face. No. Vanishing Point, it's a Dodge Charger. It's not. What did I say it was? A Hemi Cuda? Don't even know if that's right. Whatever.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a white. I'm pretty sure it's white. I should have checked that as well. And Dirty Mary Crazy Larry, which I think I may even have got the film wrong. I might have said Crazy Mary Dirty Larry. Whatever. That also isn't a Cuda. There's multiple muscle cars in that. Well, two. They kick off with an Impala, they move to a Charger, and then they go full stop into a freight train. Spoiler alert. So apologies to the American listener. He knows his name and he knows where he is in the United States of America for getting what... Those are like nation-defining films, aren't they? Certainly Vanishing Point. That's the one with the line. I know you only wanted this to be a tiny bit of corrections, and now I'm off and running. That's the one where Axl Rose gets his quote from the end of that song. I can't remember it. Where he goes, the Nazis are after the last free soul on this beautiful free soul on this planet. They're going to get him. They're closer. Do you know it? Are you a big Guns N' Roses fan? You're looking at me very strangely, Scott. Anyhow, that's the corrections done. Moving on.
Okay, I have no idea what you were going on about at the end there.
I can't stick it on as a soundbite, can I? Because then we'll get done for copyright.
Probably, yeah, don't do that.
No.
You could sing it. You could give us a rendition.
Yeah, but we get done for copyright because they'd say that must be Axl Rose singing that. That has to be. Such dulcet tones could only be the one Mr. Rose.
We'll take your word for it.
Anyhow,
Let us
slot cars,
move
Scott.
on.
Yeah.
Slot cars. What has caught your eye this week?
Back to me again.
Back to you again.
It should be more of a hit to me to you, Chuckle Brothers kind of thing. Okay, well, what caught my eye, which I thought I sent over as a note for you because I know you're into your resin weird stuff, and I can't begin to pronounce it. The Renner truck from Mercedes, designed by that Rudy Umlaut bloke. Avant Slot, and both bits are going to be. So they're doing the Blue Wonder. For people who are tiring of this rambling, they're doing the Mercedes-Benz Blue Wonder Transporter, which was designed and built to carry a 196, I think.
Yep.
A 196 Mercedes race car. And Avant Slot are going to do it, and I believe both bits are going to be slotified, so you can run your Renner truck, and you can run your W196. So that's super cool, but going to be super expensive.
I think we should just clarify that, given that this is sort of radio and paint. So these are 1950s real vehicles. So the race transporter, to translate it from the German, which was a very cab-forward sort of pickup truck, flatbed lorry, if you like, onto which the Mercedes Grand Prix team would load one Grand Prix car and then drive it to the circuits. But I think, from memory, and I'm testing here, I think it had a Grand Prix engine itself, as in the same engine as the car it was carrying, or something
No, was
very
that done for
similar.
spares? Just in case they
And
need
could
it. That
do
can't be
well.
right.
It could do, I think, 100. But again, this is from memory. It could do something ridiculous, 100 miles an hour or something. It was very fast. Now, whether it was scary as hell because the driver was sitting right at the front, and I think the front wheels were behind him, and anyway, it was designed to be very fast. But it looks wonderful. It looks like a proper Flash Gordon set dressing thing. It's all curvy and I wouldn't say steampunk, but it's sort of that. And fortunately, I have a die-cast, a 1/43 die-cast of it, so I can probably resist buying a slot car version. But it will be very tempting because it's a very lovely thing, and I think it'll be, they're talking limited production, so it's it's going to be
So how
200.
much?
Well,
They did
well,
that transit,
the
and that was
transit
200 quid, wasn't
was
it? Was it
200 quid. So
250?
I'm going to say, given that it's the transporter plus the car, I'm going to say
Oh, yeah.
300 quid.
I think 299.99, under 300 quid, would be my pitch. If we're
Okay.
right, does one of us get one?
I
I
think you
thought that
should
had you
anyway.
written all over it. I thought you'd go for one of those because you constantly reference Hobby Classic and people like that.
In the past, when I was gainfully employed and had more money than I knew what to do with, I would have done. But not now, I don't think. If I tell you I've got one, it means I've won the lottery.
Oh, and that means the end of the podcast and the last we see of you.
No. Just
Bye,
it'd be
folks. I'm off
daily
to my
then.
new house in
I'd
Mauritius.
Yeah, we could go travelling. We could take Talking Utter Slot on the road.
Oh,
I see
you mean like a Radio 1
4
roadshow?
series. I see a Channel 4 series.
What do they call the
Join
Radio
us.
1 roadshow? Oh, the Radio 1 roadshow. That's a call. That's called a callback to the listener in America who doesn't understand what I'm talking about there, because I think I referenced that in episode 3.
We probably ought to stop numbering them because it's going to start to get difficult, isn't it? The Anyway, so yes, the Avant slot. I think it's great. Avant slot. I think it's great. Anybody makes these sorts of things actually, and it's an interesting. I think one of the words I should stop saying. It says something about the current slot car market. Here we are in a recession, a global recession. There's a war on. Nobody can afford to turn the heating on. All that good stuff. And yet we seem to be getting more expensive slot cars than ever before. So people like Le Mans Miniatures, Avant Slot making these things, the Velosaur gorgeousnesses, the Bugattis, the general kind of prices of stuff. But this kind of high-end, limited production, very detailed thing, just simply, well, did it exist 20 years ago? If it did, it was very rare.
No, I would
nice.
say the market. The market has matured. I'll be proven wrong, obviously, but I would say the market has matured, possibly even fractured a little bit. And you've got these specialist peeps. Did you say what's the name of the people who did the Bugatti thing? Velar? No, it's
Velosaur.
Velosaur. You've got them. You've got this Avant slot. They've done a couple of expensive ones recently. It's I think the market has matured, and there are people. It's rather like a lot of Formula One advertising and stuff. They get a lot of Rolex adverts as well, don't they? Because there are people with money. There's fewer. No, are there fewer? I don't know. There's plenty of people with money.
Okay.
Rolexes and models of the Ringling truck. I think that truck is an extraordinary piece of engineering, really, isn't it? Didn't they use a lot of parts from the kind of production line? So, like you say, the engine is just standard issue, or I'm not sure it's standard issue race car engine, but and I thought a lot of the components, like maybe the windscreen and stuff, they're just standard, ripped off the production line, stuck on a truck that looks mad. It looks very Jetsons. And I just had a little look at a picture while you were talking, and the whole cab is forward of the front wheels. That is a truly cab forward design.
Yeah. It's It's a kind of proto Jerry Anderson.
It is, isn't it? It looks
about it, isn't it? Yeah.
very Captain Scarlet. Something about it. or Jetsons even.
Thunder,
Anyhow, what caught your eye,
Thunderbird.
Scott? Has anything caught your eye?
Well, I have to be honest and say not much because I was on holiday
Oh yeah,
and
you
I
were off in
didn't do
Ireland.
much. I didn't do much slot car. I didn't find any slot car shops in Ireland. I wasn't looking, to be fair. I didn't find any, and so found a lot of pubs, but that's an entirely different story. The I think the not really much has caught my eye in terms of news, to be honest. So that's why this is really the Pedro show. This one it's going to be back to you. What
Should I jump
did
in with
get,
the 3D thing that caught my eye and set me ranting then?
well, in a moment. But what I was going to say, just briefly,
Oh.
was going to say was as regular listeners may know, I took the plunge and have come close to the dark side, and I've bought a hand controller with knobs, more specifically a True Speed one, which I got some advice from the owner. I told him what sort of things I do, and he gave me some advice, and I bought one, and it arrived while I was away on holiday. So I've literally opened the box, held it in my hand, and gone, that feels nice, but I haven't wired it up, and I certainly haven't driven a car with it yet. So I look forward to the ongoing saga of me wiring up a controller. Now, you might think, I'm being silly, Scott. You're a mechanical engineer by qualification. You're a mature adult. You run a house. Surely you can wire up a Scalextric hand controller to make it work.
Words
But
taken from my mouth.
honestly, I am a little daunted. Electricity stuff has always been a little bit of a mystery to me. I was a mechanical engineer. Things you could see, I like things you could see, and electricity you can't until it sets fire to you. So I'm a little bit daunted. But I will sally forth, and my intention, and this is maybe where I'm overreaching my abilities, is to be able to run it both at clubs when I occasionally visit clubs, so it needs a 3-pin plug on it, but also to use it mostly at home on my Polycar stroke Carrera stroke Scalextric track. So I'm going to be either have to keep rewiring it or for different connectors, or I have to find a way of some kind of adapter universal connectory thing, which is where my aforementioned lack of electrical competence could see the whole thing come a cropper.
And I get you with the lack of electrical competence. I'm not so scared of electrocuting myself with a toy car controller, more that I will just fuse the house or burn out the controller itself. But it's a worry that I think you can get over quite easily by just doing it. But yeah, I need to take you back there because you said something about your track, and I don't understand. I thought you had a Polycar track, but you said Polycar / Carrera / Scalextric. You haven't got a track that melds all those together, have you?
No, but although, of course, that is now possible thanks to the good people at
Scalauto.
Well, partly Scalauto, but also Hobby. You mentioned them earlier. What do I want to say?
Hobby
Hobby Classic, because they're 3D printing track pieces, hairpins, but also kind of adapter pieces that widen out so you can join different kinds of track to different kinds of track.
We referenced that before, didn't we? I think.
Yeah.
Are they doing a tighter Carrera curve?
That as well. I mean, I think this is where, I'm going to segue into your 3D, but this is where it's 3D printing would seem to be really interesting and useful. Going back to the original question, I have a lot of original Scalextric track, so Plexi track. I have quite a lot of sport track. And when I say original Scalextric, I include the SCX version thereof of that. I have Carrera track, and I have the Polycar track. I tend to use Polycar on its own. I use the Carrera on its own, usually in the garden. And the Scalextric track I can mix and match, so I can have sport track mixed with the classic track, which is really good if you're doing a rally stage because you can get different sort of track pieces, different surfaces. And I think that's one of the great joys for me, anyway, as an older slot car fan. And someone who pored over those old catalogues full of wonderful track pieces like pit lanes and paddock starts and Goodwood chicanes and all that sort of thing, is all of these interesting shapes, possibly not very good for racing, but always interesting from a layout and play value. They all exist in the old Scalextrics. They don't exist in any of the new formats. So it's nice to be able to use them every now and again.
We did discuss, there was text messages went backwards and forwards in the week, weren't there, about your early days of Skull Extract included a pit lane, and my uncle Robert had a pit lane, and I eventually was gifted it. And the pit lane piece, I think, was quite a deluxe piece of track, but it seems like it was quite common. Quite a few people had them. It just took up so much space, didn't it?
I would guess that the first, beyond just getting extra straights and corners, that the first kind of accessory piece people would get would have been that pit lane, because you can add it to a layout relatively easily. Then you get into the exotic stuff like the paddock start, the Le Mans start, the Goodwood chicane, etc. So
The paddock start,
they,
the Le Mans starts, they never appealed to me. I never saw the point in. It seemed like a waste of a piece of track. And you'd use it at the beginning, and that was it. It would not. The skid chicane I also inherited from Uncle Robert, and it was a well-worn skid chicane, so it was proper skiddy. And that was my favourite piece for a long time, I would say, because it was
well,
fun.
I was given relatively late in life the flying leap, the one with the sort of
Ah,
molded boulders,
yep.
as if you're leaping over a ravine. I've never used it because I think it's just a guaranteed way of breaking
Yeah.
guide pillars off the cars. But so yeah, I think all of this stuff and all of the grandstands and buildings and people, those early catalogues and the lovely range shots, particularly the ones when they painted it, when it wasn't a photograph and it was a exaggerated perspective, very dramatically coloured painting that you would get on the sort of flyer inside the box. That spoke of all the things that you could buy, and it was marketing and it worked. So the young me went, I want all these things,
Well, do you
and the
remember
old me could buy them.
the Christmas adverts that I have in my head from they must have been the 70s, where they had a couple of minis, I think, just running around this scenic track, and then they launched themselves at the end, I think it was, off the flying leap, and that just made you want, or made me want, Scalextrics for Christmas like nobody's business. Action Man, move over. I don't want any Grenadier Guard outfits or scuba outfits for my Action Man. I want the flying leap. I think it would have been highly disappointing if I had had it, but it certainly I got track off the back of it. But I need to take you back, Scott. Are we prepared to talk? And I'm going to quote you here: interesting and useful 3D printed products. Now
We are, yeah. I'm
we are.
sitting down, and the
Okay.
listeners have had a chance to kind of draw breath and be.
So in our
Should
show
we should
notes,
we issue should we, as is the fashion, should we issue a trigger warning in case any listeners are upset about what you're about to say about 3D
yeah, and
printing?
there's counselling available, and I'll be availing myself of it. Is what the American listener will be saying. Because I have a suspicion.
Hmm.
I have a suspicion the American listener has got a printer. I think he has got a printer. Anywho, what caught my eye this week and what caused me to introduce into our show notes document a heading: 3D printing question mark WTF question mark, and then a link to what I can only describe as a 3D motor slave roller plate. There.
Say that
It's
again because I think it's such a complex concept that maybe we'll
melange
need
of
to
words
just,
and concepts, and,
yeah.
a 3D motor slave roller plate. Now you can buy the
And
basic 3D motor
break
slave
that break
roller
that
plate.
break that down for us. Break that down for us. What are
But
we? What is one of those things?
well,
Give us a give us a.
it's a little tray of 3D printed acetate resin, whatever the hell it is. A little tray of it with some holes, such that you can put not one but two motors and an axle between the two motors, and then you can put pinions on your motors, a gear on your axle, and then you can run them. And it's like, why? I I
That,
I know people possibly in America, possibly elsewhere, will be getting agitated at my ignorance, but I find it blissful, and I do wonder what the hell's this thing for? I don't get it.
well, when I looked at the picture, what it seemed to be is that one motor is, as you see, connected to a larger gear wheel, which is on an axle, which runs parallel to the shaft of the motor, if you like. and then not 90 degrees as it would on a car. And then there's another motor which is also connected to the same gear wheel. So you're running one motor which is going to turn the gear wheel, which is going to drive the pinion of the second motor, I imagine.
But the second motor will be working in reverse, won't it?
Possibly.
I mean, you're the mechanical engineer here. One's going to be going round the right way and driving the other the wrong way, isn't it?
No, they both motors will be turning in the same direction.
Well, there you go. There's the ignorance coming through. They will both be going in the same direction.
We both go in the same direction, but I assume you would only power one, because if you powered, well, unless you wanted double the power coming out, maybe that's it. Maybe it's a twin motor, and the power coming out of that central shaft is like some sort of Victorian steam engineering thing.
But is the point to run in the motors or the gears, or the point is you're running in both? But the gear can only ever live with one of the motors if you're getting your mesh perfect and all that kind of jibbity jab.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think this is a 3D printing issue. I think it's a don't run in motors issue.
I do run in water.
Do you?
Yeah, I 3D print my water, and then I I immerse my engine.
You run your motors in water. Why do you do that?
Because I believe. God, my ignorance is rising to the fore here, isn't it? I'm not sure we should publish this one. Let people think I'm a genius, not correct them.
I've got some bad news for you. They've had another 12 episodes to establish that you're... Anyway,
I run my motors in water because I understand that it means there will be less sparking at the brushes and the commutator, and therefore less pitting of the commutator. And therefore you get a smoother, flatter surface for the brush to run on. Therefore you get better contact. Therefore you get better oomph. Therefore you get a little bit, if you're lucky, you get a little bit more revolutions out of your motor. Certainly I have tested before and after, run my motor before and got, 19,000 RPM, run my motor after and got 20,000 RPM, say. It's that sort of scale of difference. So I do it. I believe I shortened the life of my motors, and I went through a whole spate. I'm not sure whether it was my perverse practices with my motors. Another accent for you there. I strongly suspect there was
very good Dutch, I think. Yeah,
it was pretty good. That wasn't Dutch. That was Spanish.
Sounded it.
I believe I'm going to put it out there, and we don't have a solicitor. So Maurizio, if you do listen. 2 questions. 1, why? And 3, please don't sue. But I think Slotted had a Duff batch a while back, and I have most of them because I burnt out several Mabuchi Can Slotted motors. And the commonality was 1, I'd put them in water to run them in. 2, they were Slotted motors.
So
since then, my Slotted motors have been fine, and I have continued to put them underwater. Okay,
so this is the very definition of paranoia, isn't it? So you think a manufacturer has a batch of dodgy motors, conspiracy theory 1. Mm-hmm. Conspiracy theory 2, you got most of them. Mm-hmm. and that you running them underwater in no way, shape or form influenced this performance. I don't know a lot about the intricacies of electric motors, and I'm sure all the pretty colours and the names and slot car motors fantastic names like Ripper and Scorcher and I don't know what else they're called.
No, they don't need to do that. That's just silliness.
It's all marketing. And as you know,
there's something called Predator, isn't there? Which I think is a very dodgy name.
It's the Predator. It's very slightly. It's a Predator. I think
don't take it down in the primary school then.
As you know, and people can do whatever they like with their toy cars. I mean, running them underwater, and I am at least partly responsible for the famous water splash at Slot Rally GB. And to this day, I put pictures of that up car running through deep water, and they go, "How do you do that? Why don't you get electrocuted?" And you go, "It's distilled water. Water does not conduct electricity." So therefore, which leads me to my question. So do you use distilled water? Do you just pour it out the tap? Is it very expensive
I believe it has
mineral water?
I don't know. ignorance
Champagne.
is still
Champagne.
bliss.
Run your motors in on champagne. Let's start
there's
a
an idea.
rumour now on this podcast that champagne is the
Oh,
best thing for
if
running
we
in
do,
slot car motors.
so I've said I'm going to do the Polycar F1 thing at Gaydon. If we now start putting out that the secret to a super fast motor is to run it in champagne,
Champagne.
all my other competitors will do that. Obviously, I won't.
Uh-huh.
Theirs will blow. I will win. Strategy.
But what if it's true? What if I've
Then,
stumbled
as
across
is
the secret
inevitably
to...
going to happen, I will lose badly, which is what I expect to do. I would like to
But
make it very clear. I don't. You said I run my cars underwater. I don't run my cars underwater. I just put the motors
Magnus.
underwater, and I use deionized water. I don't know. I don't know quite why, but I think if you Google it, it says use deionized water. So I do.
Well, that's kind of, yeah, just got the bits, because it's the bits in water that conduct the electricity. When we did Slot Rally GB and the thing ran for the whole day, and sorry, I'm hearing a voice, and it's the Alexa is talking to me, which is surprising because it's not connected to anything. Anyway, when we did run the Slot Rally GB and the water splash, and it ran the whole day, at the end of the day, when it had, a couple of hundred slot cars running through it several times, there was little bits of dust and dirt and rubber and all that stuff. So it actually had some bits in it, and if you put your fingers in the water, it did give you a bit of a kick. So it was
Really?
it did prove the theory, yeah. But it was great. But yeah, champagne. Look, if you lose, at least you'll have a lot of slightly flat champagne to drown your sorrows in.
But the problem is I don't like champagne, he said, yawning. Sorry. I really don't like champagne.
Wow.
I know people believe I have a champagne lifestyle, but I don't like the stuff. It's got to be baby sham for me.
Anyway, as I was about to say, anybody looking to me particularly for tuning tips has to remember that my mantra, soon to be available on the hoodie and coffee cup merchandise from the Talking Utter Slot shop.
Don't call it merchandise, it's merch.
Merch is if you want to go faster, turn up the voltage. Anyway, moving swiftly on from your 3D print. Did we? Well, one of the things we said was, what would we make if you had a 3D printer? What would you print? And it's got to be slot related before you get too carried away.
Well, you broke up a bit for me there. It's got to be what before I get paranoid?
It's slot car related, so you can't print money or something.
Well, I did say, Jake, I
else.
don't 3D print my water. Perhaps I should 3D print my water. So you mentioned this. I honestly don't. Other than I flippantly said a bottle opener, for no real reason. It's the first thing that came to my mind. Back on champagne and booze again. This morning I looked at slotforum.com. Other forums are available, but that's the best one. And someone has 3D printed a chassis for a Scalauto, and put it up there and said, "Oh, it's your friend Johnny. Johnny, shout out to Johnny down in Worthing. I believe he listens. I hope he listens. He's 3D printed a chassis for some Scalauto or
anyway.
other. He used to up until this point. And somebody said, "But why have you done that?" And then somebody else said, "But your printer, you need to turn your printer 90 degrees or something because it's printing. It's going to make for a weak chassis." This person says, it was that Gary Skip, I think his name is, at LMP. Shout out to at Gary Skip. You have to turn your printer in a certain way, otherwise it prints all wrong and it'll be weak. So if I'm going to 3D print a bottle opener, I've got to get that angled right. And Gary went on to say it's best at sort of like 45 degrees. I think, bloody hell, this is a complicated scientific process, isn't it? Which rules me out completely. What would you 3D print?
Well, before I go on, I was going to say, I guess these things have got a grain, if that's the case, isn't it? So if you're having to take into account the angle at which the printer is layering up, it makes sense they've got some sort of grain, so they may be stronger in some directions than others, or more flexible in some directions. It's not like a cast piece of material.
No offense to Johnny, but I zoomed in on his 3D chassis, and because I am slightly curious about the whole process, and I looked at it, and it was as grainy as feck, and I just thought, Wow. But I mean, if it's the underpinnings, that's not a problem. But if you're going to try and make a body out of it, then you're going to be sanding away for a long time, my friend. But we still haven't heard what you're going to 3D print,
Yeah,
have we? Or did I talk over you?
you'd never do that. I
I
think
wouldn't do
the
that.
I think
I
the
wouldn't do
answer is I don't know, because it's not something I would. I don't think I'd ever. I'm not.
So can
I
I
wouldn't
just
stand there
say,
going, if only I had a whatever. Maybe. I mean, I think, and people are already doing this. I think things for
I
the
can't.
track, so like spectators and that sort of limited run people, interesting people for spectators or vendors or that sort of thing around the track mechanics. That's quite a bit. People are already doing that. So
Well, yeah, the slot car Scenics, is it? They regularly rock up. I'm sure they'll be at Gaydon in a couple of months' time. And they will scan you and then print you for 30 odd quid, which seems a lot of money. But then for the technology, they got to get their money back. It seems clever and it seems funny. Um,
do you think
perhaps we
you think
should
there's a
get 3D
market for
printed ourselves.
A
Scott and
Scott and
Pedro.
Pedro limited edition? Yours would cost €30. Mine's would probably be 45 because there's more material involved. I can
Oh,
see
come
that. You
on.
can't.
Yeah. And you're just fishing for a compliment, so
I'm not.
I shall remain silent on that score.
Anyway, how did
So
how did
no,
we end up
what I
here?
wanted to say was, having come up with the idea of, hey, Pedro, why don't we do a bit on the podcast about things that we would 3D print? You actually have come to the table with nothing,
Nothing.
whereas I had a bottle
No,
opener at
no.
least. Or are you gutted
Well,
that
I need.
the Motor Slave 3D break-in machine was done before you could actually bring it to the market?
No, I know, and I should add, because I'm sure I'm going to bump into people who run their motors in underwater and prop their cars up and run things for hours and swap and do all that tuning and wonderful stuff, and it's great. And if that's what you want to do and that's where you get your joy from, then do it. What I think really doesn't matter. It's just not what I get from playing with these cars. Very early on, I think one of the reasons that got us into this, wasn't it, to see that there's no fixed way. If you just like buying these cars and keeping them in their box and looking at them, that's great. If you like buying old ones and restoring them, that's great. If you like crashing them into each other, that's great. There's no right or wrong way to enjoy. We joke about the Church of Slot, don't we? There has many chapters, and I
Well,
think
I
that
mean,
people get too het up about a right and a wrong way to do it. So,
yes, but Scott, there is.
yeah,
We've
but
had this
I don't
before.
really
There is a
race.
right and a wrong way, and my way is the right way.
Right way. That's your T-shirt for the merch store. My way is the right.
My way is the right way.
But yeah, but the serious point is, I think that's this. It should be fun. I mean, we get into the psychology. I think there's a huge. And it's huge. Is it huge? I don't know. It's grown adult men with responsibilities and possibly families who spend money and time playing with toy cars. It's already a quirky thing to be doing, and therefore I think we should just all accept everybody's doing it. Alternatively, sort of stand at the side and go, he ran his motor in champagne, bloody idiot. And anyway, I don't know, not a rant, just a kind of just. I remember once going to a Subbuteo swap meet, and sort of standing there watching people playing Subbuteo very earnestly, and sort of looked at my mate I was with and said, look at these people, how daft are they? And then just as I was about to say it, I thought, yeah, well, we all gather together in a cold barn and play with Skeletrix cars, so don't mock anyone else.
Oh, I think Subbuteo players can be mocked. I think it's only right that
Oh,
we mock
careful,
Subbuteo players. They take it very seriously, and they collect whole squads, don't they? They collect all the kits and everything. And I am actually dead jealous because I love some of those. When you get a really good stadium with the grandstands and everything, I think as a modelly thing, it looks brilliant. But then the hand of God comes down, and rather than marshal a car, it flicks a whole player at a ball. How realistic is that, people? Come on, crash and burn.
It's pretty good, actually. It's pretty good. In fact, one of the minor inspirations for all of this was there's a YouTube channel which I think is now gone behind a paywall, but it was called Table Football Monthly, which was a couple of chaps who enjoyed their Subbuteo, and they would do a monthly video podcast about Subbuteo, and it was great, and encouraged me to dig mine out. So at the beginning of the second lockdown, the one that sort of started at Christmas, we got the Subbuteo out, and we had a World Cup, 32 teams, draws, knockout competition. I thought it would keep us occupied for a couple of weeks. We didn't finish until Easter.
Wow. I thought you were going to say, I thought it'd keep us going for a couple of weeks. It lasted a day before we started shouting at one another.
No, we were having games in school. It was good fun, and we couldn't do anything else, so why not?
And the technology exists now that surely, I forget what it's called, the clever eye thing that decides whether it was a goal or not. But you could have a little GoPro down in the hidden lens down in the stands, and you could have watch the line to see whether the ball actually crosses. You could do everything. I do like Subbuteo. I wronged it earlier. The idea of it, anyway. I don't want it, but I love the idea of it.
I think a bit like
and talking of realism,
it works on the basis.
Go on.
Well, I was going to say it had that joy of you could collect lots of them. There was the accessories like the TV tower and the police set and all. There was lots of things to buy. So the inherent set, a pitch, a ball, 2 teams. The game was dead simple to get, and that it wasn't going to get any more complicated. But you could add and enjoy collecting teams, painting the teams, doing all that stuff. It had. I think there's a lot of similarities and similar sort of time. That was probably 50s, 60s when it was at its peak.
Was it?
It's
sort of. You talk. I didn't apply my brain. The idea that you could buy white kits. Subbuteo white kits basically and paint up your own team. It's almost sort of a precursor to Warhammer and all that orc malarkey and Space Marines and that kind of jib jab, isn't it?
Yeah, at the time I used to repaint my existing, so I would watch whatever World Cup or something I'd be suitably taken with, I don't know, Peru. So I would transform West Germany into Peru, and then a few years later they would get transformed into somebody else. Only when I became rich and foolish did I start buying. I'm in the market for hand-painted teams. Again, a bit like resin slot cars, there's a market for these extremely well-painted and detailed teams.
Really?
Lovely stuff. I admire this.
When you say it's still a thing.
Yeah, you can commission guys to... I've bought them as presents for...
I absolutely love the
someone's
idea
favourite team.
That there might be a podcast out there where grown men talk about some kind of stupid thing like toy footballers. I mean, how... oh, wait.
We should beat them. We should...
What do we talk about? You were talking about realism.
We should get together.
I sent you that link to... I'm going to forget the name of them, but they're Americans, but I don't believe they're the American listening to the podcast. And they do they do films of their races, and they do a commentary over the top. And the one I sent to you, I watched it again this morning. I accused the guy of vaping heavily into one of the corners to just put a cloud of fog there. But I don't think it was vape, looking at the video. But they start their race, and the commentator says, and they're off into the early morning fog there. And it's quite amusing. I'll try and find the link and put it somewhere. I don't know if it ever gets to YouTube, this podcast of ours. But I thought that was quite sweet. And the realism is quite amusing. If it is realism, again, I mean, it's more like a scene from that film, The Fog.
Yeah, it's that wonderful thing. It's a piece of plastic with an electric motor running on a track with a groove in it. There's not much that's realistic about it, but it does give us a lot of pleasure and a lot of fun. And when you see some people's tracks, lovely routed track that maybe they just for racing, or they've done lots of landscaping and scenery, and
but there's a godfather
with your mates, then great.
There's a godfather of the routed track over in the States, isn't there? I've forgotten his name, but he had a website and he inspired a whole raft of people to do some pretty fantastic routed wood tracks. I can't remember his name. I want to say Luff, but I don't think that's his name. It's interesting though, isn't it? It's grown men. They get to a certain age and all they want to do is take their toys to another level, toys of their youth to another level. I think that tells us a lot about male.
We're coming to an end. A one for the future. Regular listeners will remember that very early on we had a letter. It wasn't a letter; it was an email. But anyway, we had a letter, and it was from someone who works at one of the slot car companies who are going to protect.
Oh yes, it was.
We've
completely forgotten about him.
And communication. And most recent communication was an interesting point that, and I'm summarising for brevity, we, whether us in general or the kind of blokes our age, talk about old cars quite a lot. We like old stuff, perhaps more than others. And what would the slot car business have been? So when we started in the 60s or 70s, if the only cars that had been available were 30, 40, 50 years old, would we have been interested in it? And do we need the new stuff to be interested in, to get the newer and possibly younger people in? So although we all get very, we got very enthusiastic about a probably expensive race transporter with a 50s Grand Prix car on the back of it. Here we are. That's going to be an 80-year-old car. So a model of something which is, 80 years old. No, not 80 years old. Something like that. 70 years old at least by the time it comes out. Would we have get just as excited if there was a modern version of that? And why not?
You've lost me.
People?
If there was a modern...
I've probably lost the listener as well, so we should... The point... The gist was, it's all very well to get excited about old stuff and want models of old stuff. You remember we did our, what would we make if we were a slot car company? And everything we picked, I think, well, most of what we picked was old. They were vintage retro cars. But why didn't we pick the very cutting edge of the latest things? And I guess that perhaps reflects our age and our passions. But the question he put was,
I'm with you. Yeah,
would we as youngsters have got interested in the hobby had all that been available at the time was old models rather than current models? And it's a very good question. I think
that's a definite answer of no. But I thought, in my defence, I was saying I wanted to do Super GT. I mean, I know I did want to do the 1995 Le Mans grid. But did I not also say I would like to do Super GT? Because Super GT, they have some mad-looking machines, great liveries, mad-looking machines, and that's a great series. And I'm really annoyed. I don't know. It used to not be broadcast at all in the over here. Maybe on Eurosport or something, I suppose. But I'd love to watch a bit of that.
Everything's on YouTube after a week or two.
This is true.
So if you don't mind not watching it live, then you'll probably find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're off and we've got philosophical, perhaps, but then that's our age. So
I think that's what happens with us, Scott. We begin by bumbling around and not really being sure where we are or what we're doing. We talk a little bit about slot cars, and then we get all wispy and philosophical, and we fade out.
And do any listeners last this long? Right,
probably
and
not.
Tell us if you can. We really should shape it better than this. Anyway, I'm going to say that's probably enough of the wistful meanderings of two middle-aged men with nothing better to do, otherwise known as Talking At a Slot, the Slot Car Podcast. Pedro, you were going to say something.
No, I was only going to say goodbye once you'd finished. Did you say goodbye?
Stopped prattling. Not yet. I'll say goodbye.
And I'll say goodbye.
See you guys soon. Bye.
Cheerio, Scott.
You're listening to Talking At a Slot, the Slot Car Podcast. Be it Carrera or Selectrics. I've got that wrong. Keep going. Carrera or Selectrics, Slot It or SCX. We love buying, racing, and most of all, talking about slot cars. My name is Scott Brownlee, and I'm joined, as usual, by my fellow slot addict and car racer. He doesn't like to be called a collector. It's
Pedro. Hello, everyone. Oh, you wanted me to say more? I apologise. Damn it.
It's okay.
We're on fire from the get-go. Rather like with episode 14, we're on the fire. We're on the fire. We should be on. Oof. Okay. Why don't I let you take over?
This is episode 14.
Is it? I thought it was 15. We have. We genuinely... it's two old men who don't know where they are, don't know what they're doing, but are recording it for posterity and sharing it with the world. I know you like putting, but let's start again. This is gone way so far off piece. It's got you just know that's right. Going in the outtakes at the end.
At the end, I don't. We're fine, but let's start again. Ready?
Yeah.